ranked as a top-tier employment attorney, featured on CNN Money, numerous awards for Best Employment Law, a fierce advocate fighting for your legal needs.
Welcome to Legal Views with your host, Attorney Sheila R. Stuart.
Welcome to Legal Views with Attorney Sheila R. Stuart. I am your host, and we are excited to have you with us on today. Today, we have a very, very important and interesting subject matter. But before we get into the details of that information, I just want to tell you a little bit about how you can reach our office. We are located at 231 South Beamiston Avenue, Clayton, Missouri, 63105. The suite there is Suite 800, and the number is 314-854-1339. 314-854-1339, and we are here to meet your legal needs. Today, we are going to unravel a very important issue as it relates to abortion, as it relates to the right to privacy, as it relates to what are my legitimate expectations of privacy, and can the government intrude upon these legitimate expectations? What level of intrusion how far can the government go? Is this intrusion of the government? Does it violate my rights? And what are the long-term impacts of the government acting in this matter? So we're going to take a look at these important issues on today. And we have a wonderful guest in the studio with us. She is brilliant, and she is a great attorney. She is from Vermont, and this is no other than Attorney Jennifer Stralka. How are you doing on today?
I'm doing well, Sheila. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to discussing this bit of a controversial subject.
Yes, it is a very controversial subject, and people need to arm themselves with the correct information so you can understand how this may impact you down the road. Because I do believe that there is an impact from this decision, this potential decision that is coming down. So let's look at first what has happened. Let's just do a quick overview of what has taken place. There was a case filed in Mississippi, and Attorney Stralka is going to talk about that case. And what that case does is it's attempting to overturn the long-term case standing of Roe v. Wade. Now, how does that impact you? How does that impact your family? How does that impact the church? So we're going to look at these issues. Now, as we get started, we want you to know that we are providing you with information only. The information that we are providing does not necessarily represent the views of Attorney Stralka, the views of the church, or my views. We are just giving you the information so that you can be armed with the appropriate knowledge of what is taking place at this time, okay? Now, as I was stating previously, the decision of Roe v. Wade is on the brinks of being overturned. And how will that ultimately impact you, if at all? And so let's just do a quick overview of what Roe v. Wade represents. Roe v. Wade represents basically, and layman's understanding in terms, is the right to an abortion. It represents the right to an abortion, and that the states can offer that service to women. Okay. Now that right was made applicable to the states through the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment addresses many aspects of citizenship and the rights of citizens. And it's most commonly litigated, and the phrase that comes out of the litigation of the 14th Amendment is equal protection of the law. Equal protection of the law. And when we think about equal protection under the law, we think about our landmark cases such as Brown v. Board of Education, which dealt with racial discrimination, then Roe v. Wade, which dealt with reproductive rights, and Bush v. Gore, everybody remember that case, that dealt with the election recount, and Reed versus Reed, which addressed gender discrimination, okay? So equal protection of the law is very critical. And this case, Roe v. Wade, it was birthed out of this 14th Amendment right. 14th Amendment due process is made applicable to the state. So the protection, governmental protections, flows to the state, whereas you are protected under the 14th Amendment. So basically, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge upon the privileges and immunities of their citizens. So no laws can be made in the state that will take authority over your rights and over your citizenship, okay? So you have these great rights that have been afforded to you under the 14th Amendment, and that no person shall be denied equal protection of the law. So we're looking at these issues to make you aware of the rights that have been afforded to you. So this new case that has come down is basically saying that states can now decide not to give you that right. And it looks like the conservative states are making that decision not to allow you to have that right. Now, I would like for my guests to jump in at this point in time. And can you tell us about the Dobbs case, this case that was leaked from the Supreme Court, from Politico, and how this case can impact individuals today?
Yes, absolutely. And yes, as you said, on May 2nd, the news outlet Politico obtained a draft of this upcoming decision, and the case is called Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. And the case provides basically an opening for conservative justice to reassess, as you said, the landmark 1973 Roe v. Wade decision that protected the right to abortion before fetal viability in the United States. And just by way of background, fetal viability is generally considered to begin at 24 weeks of gestational age. One thing to just note is that Chief Justice John Roberts indicates that this draft does not reflect the justice's final opinions, but should it stand, as Sheila said, the court's ruling wouldn't ban abortion nationwide, but would leave the decision up to the individual states. The Supreme Court's final ruling in Dobbs is expected to come in June, sometime in June of this year. Basically, by way of background, again, the case concerns Mississippi's request to uphold a 15-week abortion ban. There are exceptions that the law had made with regard to medical emergencies and serious fetal abnormalities. The decision affects all state abortion laws. The abortion provider, the defendant, which we'll call JHWO, initially sued Mississippi officials in federal court. They argued that the state's ban on abortion violated the constitutional right to abortion as established by Roe and reaffirmed in the 1992 Supreme Court case of Planned Parenthood v. Casey, where in that case, the Supreme Court upheld the core decisions made in Roe, but it stated that state restrictions on abortion are constitutional if they place undue burden on the person seeking the procedure. This ruling still forbids states from banning the majority of abortions, but it did broaden the state's power to regulate the procedure. Ultimately, the Supreme Court took up the Dobbs case and heard oral arguments in December of last year, based on the question of whether all pre-viability prohibitions on elective abortions are unconstitutional. under Alito's draft, it expressly states that the word abortion is not found in the U.S. Constitution and does not meet the Fourth Amendment's fundamental right test. Therefore, a right, as the opinion states, does not exist. In essence, that Roe, quote unquote, was egregiously wrong from the start.
Right.
The opinion, and Sheila, what would you like to add to that? I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Well, no, you've done an outstanding job of going over Dobbs, and that's one of the issues that many individuals may not be aware of, that may not have legal training, is that abortion is not a fundamental right. Okay, it's not mentioned in the Constitution anywhere. And when abortion was ruled that it was legal in the states, this court basically was saying that if the baby is viable, if the baby can live outside of the womb, you cannot abort the child. Now, remember, I am not expressing my views on this. Okay, my views, are more in line with the word. Okay. But I'm giving you the legal background and the legal understanding and framework of this, my guest and I. Okay, so the word abortion is not necessarily a fundamental right. Okay, that is what the court is saying, and that they got it wrong under Roe v. Wade. Now, do you think they got it wrong under Roe v. Wade?
Do I? That's hard to say. There are so many cases, previous cases like Griswold v. Connecticut, which was the right to contraception, or Loving v. Virginia, which is the right to interracial marriage, that were premised on privacy. And so those cases were discussed as part of the decision that, premised on what Roe v. Wade was all about with regard to the 14th Amendment. So it's hard to say, but it did follow that precedent, which I find is pretty interesting and in essence right on the money if you want to look at it that way. So
see, the arguments are from groups of people. You have a group of people that say clear-cut abortion is wrong. Whether you're going to die or whether the doctors have given you a bad prognosis, abortion is wrong. That's the period. Then it's another group of people that state that abortion is wrong only if the baby is viable. It can live outside of the womb, and then you kill the baby. You're killing this human being, so it's wrong. Then there's other groups that say that it's wrong only if the mother's life is at risk, or if you were raped or molested, then abortion is okay. And so you have all of these competing views on this issue, all of these competing views saying that it's wrong for this reason and it's not wrong for that reason, or it's okay if you have been raped, or it's okay if your health is at risk. However, what is the law saying on this issue? The law basically is saying, and I'm going to turn it back over to you, Jennifer. The law is basically saying that the citizens, the people of the state, have the right to make that decision, and that decision of whether it's right or wrong should not be held within the court environment. It should be held within the forum of the people, and that the people vote and decide what the regulations are within the state. And that the breakdown was that Roe v. Wade was wrong because the decision should have never moved to the courts. Should have always stayed with the state and for the election ballot. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'd like to just point out that Roe affirmed, as you've said, that a right to abortion under the 14th Amendment's liberty protection, under a right to privacy. And the question, I mean, there's a balance to, the federal government's imposition of certain laws over the states' rights to impose their own restrictions based on their needs, based on their political persuasions, based on their culture. So it's a hard thing to say. But going to Roe and the fundamental decision is that getting back to that is the right against undue. It's really the right against undue government intrusion into fundamental personal issues and decisions. And is that a state or a federal issue? Obviously now with Dobbs, it's going to become a state issue and something to address.
Okay, interesting. And because a woman's rights, I think the balancing and the balancing act is, does the government have a right to take authority and to make a decision over the reproductive rights and the privacy of a woman? Or is the government going too far? So based upon what the people are saying right now, the government is going too far. People are protesting all over the country as we speak. Protests have broken out throughout the United States because individuals are saying that this is a fundamental right that is being taken away from a woman to decide regarding what her health care will look like, and the privacy of her personal decisions that she wants to make, how that will play out. I think it's a fascinating issue. From my perspective, I think the issue of the rights of an individual and government intrusion is very important. And I think if we need to have a grasp of how far-reaching what that can look like in terms of civil rights and in terms of other issues that may come up if conservative individuals or non-conservative individuals decide that they want to undo a rule of law that have stood for a long period of time, such as stare decisis. Tell us about stare decisis.
Well, taking a look at the previous decisions and following them, basically, and in terms of stare decisis, there are previous cases where Roe actually looked at this in terms of the right abortion deeply rooted in the nation's history and traditions and essential to our nation's scheme of ordered liberty. And in that, the Roe court answered that question as yes. And earlier, as I've said before, earlier in terms of precedent, earlier court cases had drawn on language in the First, Fourth, Ninth, and 14th Amendments to argue that citizens have certain zones of privacy, and these zones of privacy are covered activities, and again, as such, the right to marry a different race, the right to procreate, and not be sterilized by the state, and the right to contraceptives.
Very good, very good. Do you think the decision is going to be handed down in June, sometime this summer, and they are expecting that the decision will come forth in June? I would like for you to come back in June and for us to discuss how the court ruled, because we know that the leaked draft, it is a draft, but we pretty much know where they're going. Can you continue to tell us about Dobbs and some of the main points in Dobbs, and so we can discuss those?
Absolutely. With regard to the opinion, and going back to what I was saying when I quoted the actual Dobbs case by saying what Alito had said, that Roe was egregiously wrong from the start, the opinion analyzes the line of reasoning set by Roe in the Casey case, as I had stated before, and evaluates the standard of incorporated constitutional rights and looks to the previous precedent to evaluate the right to an abortion as noted, but it all aimed at the political goal of overturning the Supreme Court decision on which many have relied on for 5 decades. Alito further dismisses Roe and Casey's arguments that are raised that abortion falls within historical right of privacy, as I've said. He says there's a difference between an abortion case where the government has a state interest in the fetus and cases that rely in part or whole on Roe and Casey. The second, Alito argues that Roe and Casey do not provide evidence that abortion is essential to our nation's quote unquote scheme of ordered liberty. Through the phrase ordered liberty, it appears nowhere in the Constitution per the decision, where Alito counters Casey by arguing that while people may see the right to obtain an abortion as liberty, it does not qualify as ordered liberty as he defines it. Underpinning any constitution, also wanted to point out that underpinning any constitutional case is the level of review that the court applies. In this, there are three different, three different types of scrutiny: strict scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, and rational basis review. Under this case, Alito found no constitutional basis for abortion. He applies the lowest possible level of constitutional review, which is that rational basis review, where the statute must have a legitimate state interest, and there must be a rational connection between the statute's means and goals. And again, in essence, if issued in June, Alito's decision to overturn Roe and Casey would allow any state to pass abortion restrictions by naming one or more legitimate, as they feel, state interests and showing only a rational connection to those interests. And again, in part 2 of our series, we will be sure to discuss more about the case once it comes out.
Okay. The case in Mississippi, it states one of the comments that was placed in the draft was that Roe was egregious from the start. Its reasoning was exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences as far as bringing about a national settlement on the issue of abortion. They say that it was egregiously wrong from the start. How can they say that it was egregiously wrong from the start? Do you think there are 50 years of precedent giving women the right to privacy, and they are now saying that it was egregiously wrong, and it's time to heed to the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representative, which I talked about that earlier, is that they want this whole issue of the abortion to go to the ballot. And the permissibility of abortion, the limitations upon it, are to be resolved by the democracies of the citizens of the state in which they reside in. Do you think this type of issue is going to split the United States and cause a huge problem here?
I think it definitely will. I mean, there's already protests, as you mentioned earlier, and with regard to over the years, the difference of opinion and the controversial nature of it will definitely lead to some unrest, if you will. I think what you said before about the Roe v. Wade case, I believe it's 51 years old, and it's established this right to privacy and abortion. And then other cases before it, which pro-abortion individuals feel is relevant to the inquiry. It is very difficult now that they're looking to overturn it when this has been very well established. And we will talk about the implications of the decision that can really shed light on the difficulties in that regard.
Very good, very good. I think that the United States is going to continue to split on these types of issues that are very significant to their citizens and how we resolve these issues. I think overturning Roe is going to have a lot of serious implications for many groups of people and for many individuals. And that's the type of information that we want to bring you, is how it may impact you. There are certain groups. There are some Christians, devout Christians, that just do not believe in abortion at all, regardless of the issue of health, regardless of the issue of rape. They do not believe in abortion. We are not here to debate the views of anyone or to say that this view is right or this view is wrong. We're here today to share the legal analysis from the leaked brief and to give you that information from the leaked brief. What are your thoughts on that, Jennifer?
Well, there are exactly. I mean, there are several implications that go both ways for those that are anti-abortion or those are pro-abortion. With regard to what you were saying from the religious contingency, that they certainly this decision would follow their values and beliefs. Another area where it would be for those that are pro-life is that now the states would obviously be able to make their own decisions based upon, again, their needs, their culture, and their preferences, their political persuasion. Another implication that's really important to point out, and again, this is what's reported. It does not necessarily represent my views, but very heavily reported on the news, is that if it's struck down, as the Dobbs case suggests it could be, it will have a major impact in states across the country that have already signaled their intention to restrict or ban abortion. Now, there are 18 states that have what are called trigger laws to ban abortion if Roe is overturned, or have pre-Roe abortion bans still on the books that could take effect in such event. Note that a significant amount of these trigger laws were enacted during the Trump administration. Additionally, some states have laws currently not in effect banning abortion after 6 to 8 weeks. And many, specifically 26 states are expected to ban or restrict abortion if Roe v. Wade is overturned. What are your thoughts about that, Sheila?
I think what's going to happen is people are just going to get in a car for the most part and drive to another state and to have an abortion. Like I live in Missouri, which is extremely conservative. Illinois, which is right across the river, very, very close, is very liberal. Individuals would be able to enter into Illinois under duress and obtain that abortion in most cases, because the state of Missouri is likely to follow whatever the law is in Mississippi. And your state, Vermont, is, if I'm not mistaken, is a very liberal state.
Correct.
And so your state will not follow that law that's going to come down from the Supreme Court, where they will regulate abortion. So that is how individuals can get around some of the harm that they may suffer. They will enter into other states. And then for those individuals that cannot enter into other states to do that, I think it will open the door to some critical healthcare issues that will primarily impact Black and brown communities, and people will resort to whatever means they have to get the services that they need. Maybe unhealthy, maybe unsanitary, or could result in infections or death. But I think once those laws kick in and individuals are not able to go into another state, that it definitely will open the door for individuals to take action that may be against the best interests of their health.
Absolutely, Sheila. I mean, getting to your point about the expected influx of people into liberal states for women to have an abortion. Just by example, after Texas enacted its 6-week ban on abortion last year, some residents began to get abortions out of state. In the final 4 months of last year, it's been reported that Planned Parenthood clinics in states near Texas reported a nearly 800% increase in abortion patients from Texas compared to the same period in the prior year. So you're absolutely right that it's going to, in essence, it could put a burden on states that allow for abortions because of the influx of people from other states seeking an abortion. Getting back to also what you said about people of color, they're more likely than their peers to get abortions based on statistics. There are people that which would really be a detriment to them and their needs in that regard. There's also with people who have challenging socioeconomic situations that they would in essence be restricted from access to abortions because they wouldn't be able to afford to travel to get an abortion, which is, another significant issue. And you were also bringing up negative health effects. It's reported that 7% of women with unwanted pregnancies attempt self-abortion, typically with herbal, medicinal, physical methods, or emergency contraception. Complications can certainly arise, like you had said, infection, excessive bleeding. While this is somewhat uncommon, the procedures just have people who engage in self-abortion, if you will, are successful just 28% of the time. So that there's been a question raised that will banning abortion increase maternal mortality rates in this country? Another question is that with regard to, or another point is that some blue states are already taking steps to enshrine the right to abortion in state law. From Colorado to New Jersey, Democratic governors have signed laws protecting reproductive rights and have announced their intention to be able to provide abortion services to people who live in states where the procedure is restricted. What do you think about that, Sheila?
Do I think that blue states should provide those services, or
what do you think? Oh, go ahead.
Do I think blue states should provide those services of abortion?
Basically, just about the changing the laws and what your thoughts are in terms of their reaction or response to the specific potential of this Dobbs decision.
I think it's going to be chaotic.
Absolutely.
Once the decision comes down, it's going to be chaotic, because one thing we have to understand. Well, this is my view. The world does not necessarily operate off the beliefs and feelings of one particular group of people. Okay, so you have to enact laws that represent the needs of a society. Okay, I may believe in certain things that may be more conservative than another individual, but do I have the right to abridge that person's right to what they desire or what they're seeking after? That's a big issue. And I think when we take it upon ourselves to restrict the rights of other people because we believe a certain way, we have to learn how to balance that out. My views on whether I think people need to get the healthcare services that they need. That's how I would put that. And whatever health services that an individual may need, they should be afforded the right to get those healthcare services. If you're asking me about abortion in particular, I prefer not to say it this time.
No, definitely not asking you.
I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't agree with my views on abortion, but that's neither here or there. I am just here to give you what the new laws are basically going to say. Abortion impacts a lot of individuals. They state that 1 out of 4 will need an abortion or will want to get an abortion. So you're taking that right away. Or are you taking a fundamental right away, or is that person not entitled to that medical service? That's what the issues are. Should that person have the right to obtain that service? Absolutely. And if they can obtain that service, is that a privacy right that's more specific to that individual that government does not have the right to intrude upon or get involved in. Okay? Yeah. But then this is the issue. When the service is free and government funds are provided for that service, that's another issue that people may have, that, you know, you're seeking this type of service, medical service, an abortion, and then you want the government to help fund it or pay for it.
Right. That's absolutely right, Sheila. And you know, that's exactly right. Like I said, and there are other, according to, just in terms of additional implications going forward with what you're saying, there's one source has provided that there are several implications of Roe v. Wade with regard to it being overturned that could stretch far beyond accessing an abortion. Specifically, the term abortion is used in medicine also to refer to a miscarriage. Misunderstandings about that term, without, as some have reported and opined, without Roe's protections, could result in improper care and obstruction to care, similar to what you were saying before. For example, when miscarriages occur, for instance, in the first trimester of pregnancy, a doctor may use drugs to help expel the fetus and extra fluid in the uterus. Which could result from the Dobbs decision, that which multiple states may seek to crack down on medication abortion pill access, and a potential workaround if Roe v. Wade is struck down. There are also questions with regard to emergency access to health needs, in essence, with emergency contraception. Those are concerns. There are questions whether, in terms of additional health impacts with regard to IVF and storing of eggs, and it just goes so far beyond just the right of privacy, if you will.
And that's one of the controversies regarding the initial Roe v. Wade decision, that they're saying that that the individual that is claiming the right to abortion, that it was never written in the Constitution to begin with, and so it was not a right, but it was the rights of the 14th Amendment were expanded upon to give individuals that right. Okay, so the primary holding is a person may choose to have an abortion until a fetus becomes viable, based on the right to privacy contained in the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. Viability means the ability to live outside the womb, which usually happens between 24 and 28 weeks after conception. So that was the basic holding of Roe v. Wade. And so when you unravel that holding and you look at it, the law is basically telling individuals that you have a due process right of privacy, which is contained in the 14th Amendment. And based upon this 14th Amendment right, you have this right to abortion. The new law is stating that you're reading too much into the 14th Amendment. You do have a right to privacy, but the right to privacy is not inclusive of an abortion, therefore overturning 51 years of precedent. That's amazing.
Right. It's a literal, it's looking at the actual language of the Constitution saying it's not in there, sorry, which in essence is the crux of what they said. And also, obviously, as I've mentioned, in terms of it not being ordered liberty, it might be liberty, but not ordered liberty. It's not deeply rooted in history and tradition, although one could argue in the alternative that, like you've said, it's been around for 51 years. This is the controversy. This is the one of the cruxes of the issue. So
And when Roe v. Wade was decided, that the entire Supreme Court was all male. No, it was all male. There was not one woman on the Supreme Court when it was decided. And that was another issue that individuals had with the analysis as it related to the different trimesters and trying to do the breakdown. And that Roe v. Wade was pretty much written around protection that was going to be provided for doctors if something went wrong during the abortion service. And so that it was written very strongly to support medical doctors and so forth. However, the opinion didn't have a woman on the bench when it was written. And so
right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nope. Go ahead.
No, I want to hear what you were saying.
There's been an argument, let's just face it, that men wrote this, men did this, that, Republic, and again, this doesn't necessarily represent my view, but that Republicans
I think your connection is getting a little wonky. Just keep, yeah. It's a little better.
Yeah, yes. Sorry about that. Just that going back again, I don't know where I people miss me, but with regard to men telling women what to do, there's been some argument that I've heard where people have said, well, men should have to pay for abortions if this is the case. I mean, we can go on another discussion of tangent on that, but it's interesting to hear people's views when I've spoken to a number of different people on the liberal side and also on the conservative side before I did this show. And it was just very interesting to hear their views on it. I very much enjoyed the difference of opinion. And in fact, it was very interesting talking to my husband as a healthcare provider, what he had to say about it. And, just very interesting perspectives and just highlighting the controversy that's at hand.
Right. Your husband is a doctor. I'm not going to ask what his views are on it.
No,
I'm not going to ask his views. I'm not going to.
He made some points just from a healthcare perspective, which I thought were just very interesting. And I'm just pointing out, like you had said very earlier in the show, that it's just such a controversial issue with people that are just all over the place. And so I was just thinking that it was, again, very interesting what people's thoughts are in this, and from a healthcare perspective to someone who's a lawyer to someone who's, it's just, again, very, very interesting.
It is very interesting. And I think individuals that's at the hem of institutions like a church, not-for-profit organizations, women organizations, they need to come to the table, identify a plan of action on how they can help individuals, how you can guide them, provide them with counseling, provide them with the information to keep them and the unborn child safe. You don't want the woman now saying, okay, I was raped. A 15-year-old girl saying this from a conservative state like Missouri, a 15-year-old girl, 12-year-old girl, raped by her uncle or raped by her father, stepfather, and she wants this service, and the powers to be are saying, no, you can't have this service. So you have a frightened child that's already been violated, been raped, and so what does she do? She finds someone that can provide this for her because she's not interested in carrying this child, and she was raped, okay? So you have severe situations that are going to take place. And I think people need to be sensitive to all of the different views. You don't have to embrace them. You don't have to agree with them. However, you need to be educated on them and provide individuals with the resources and the information that they need so that you can assist someone. What are your thoughts on that, attorney?
Yeah, absolutely. And just even talking about young women raped or not raped, just in terms of statistics, the most going back to 2019, for instance, the highest rate of abortions were actually among adolescents, age 19 and younger. And so with regard to a potential ban on abortion, you're going to restrict abortions to having the availability of an abortion for younger people that may not necessarily understand the implications as much as an adult.
Mhm.
I'm not saying for all of them, but it does have an effect on them because it if they're in high school, there's so many different implications of that. And obviously, if you're raped again, that's definitely threatened with this decision. So definitely wanted to point out you're absolutely right on that. And it's just it's not surprising that a high rate of adolescents are seeking abortions, and going again will now younger populations may not have the means to cross the border and get an abortion in other states, as we've talked about before, with regard to those of socioeconomic challenges and certain minority populations, quite possibly.
When you say some of the biggest group that have the abortions are 19 and younger, do you know what the younger is? Is it 12? Is it 13? Do you know what that age from that statistics? I remember seeing that statistical study, but I can't remember what that young age was.
I believe it's basically between 15 and 19 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, from what I understand.
And that's extremely young, 15 to 19, that's very young. And those individuals will be more likely to be fearful under extreme anxiety and duress. And those are the individuals that will end up, seeking out alternative measures to abort that child or to abort that fetus. And that is why we are trying to share information. So institutions such as a church, not-for-profit organizations, be prepared to provide counseling and assistance to individuals. We're not telling you to encourage them to get an abortion or not, or to have an abortion. Be available to provide that information to these individuals, because the statistics show again that the individuals that will be harmed by these rulings are poor people, Black and brown people, individuals that lack socioeconomic resources, and individuals that lack access to health care and good health care. That drives a lot of individuals, excuse my French, into alley medical services. Alley, A-L-L-E-Y, alley. Okay, and we don't want that. Therefore, if you are aware that you are living in a restrictive state, and you know that that population of individuals are likely to be harmed by this potential ruling that will come forth this summer, then what services of information, what body of resources will you give this person to help protect their life?
I absolutely agree with you, Sheila. I think that there will be a burden on, just for instance, on healthcare, on needs for counseling services, especially in states where they don't offer abortions, just like in states where and obviously in states where there are continuing to have young women, especially or women, all women, but especially young women counseled, who might have more challenges with regard to the abortion process and et cetera. I definitely agree with you on that one, Sheila.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap this segment up. We want to thank you for tuning in to Legal Views with attorney Sheila R. Stuart. This is a very difficult subject matter. It holds many conflicting views, many divergent opinions on this subject matter. People become very enraged and enthralled when they're speaking about this. But however, whatever your views are, we want to provide individuals with information so that they are armed with the resources that they need to make the best decisions possible for them and their family or a loved one that may be facing a critical, scary situation in their life. Jennifer, I'll allow you to have the last few words, and then we'll look for you to come back in June to discuss the official ruling.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Sheila. I really appreciate it. I also appreciate the legal analysis and your expertise, Sheila. It's great hearing what you have to say about it based on, again, your experience and expertise as an attorney. I'm very impressed by having worked, with you and having studied the bar with you. So I'm very excited to come back and to talk more about it once the decision is final.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Don't leave. And we will see you on next week. Thank you and have a wonderful weekend and happy Mother's Day to you. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great evening.